There comes a moment, quiet, subtle, almost invisible to the outside world. A moment that doesn't look dramatic from the outside. No slammed doors, no heated arguments, no grand announcements. It happens in silence, when the empath, the one who always feels, always absorbs, always understands, finally stops caring. Not because they've become cold, not because they've given up on love, humanity, or connection, and not because they're suddenly different, but because something inside them has finally clicked, a strange kind of clarity. A clarity strong enough to break invisible chains, because caring too much is its own kind of exhaustion, its own brand of self-neglect, its own slow erosion of the soul. And if you're honest, you know this, don't you? You felt the weight of other people's storms on your chest, like wet clothes you never asked to wear. You've absorbed moods you didn't create. You've responded to needs that were never reciprocated. You've held chaos that wasn't yours to manage. You were the one listening at 2 a.m. when your own world was falling apart. You were the one giving grace to people who never paused long enough to notice your hands were shaking. You were the one carrying conversations, relationships, and expectations like emotional furniture no one else wanted to lift. And you did it quietly, softly, almost instinctively. But something happens, something transformative, when the empath reaches their limit. It isn't a collapse. It isn't a crisis. It isn't revenge. It's a shift, a psychological pivot so subtle yet so powerful that even the people who once exploited your kindness suddenly feel the difference. The energy changes. The dynamic changes. You change, because for the first time, you are no longer emotionally available to everyone who demands a piece of you. Carl Jung once wrote a line people rarely quote, yet it fits perfectly here. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And when an empath stops caring, it's because, often for the first time, they finally begin doing exactly that. Accepting themselves, prioritizing themselves, choosing themselves. They realize they've spent years living inside other people's stories, but neglecting to write their own. So the question becomes, what happens next? And that's where the real transformation begins. 1. The empath detaches from people who feed on their energy. You start seeing patterns you once excused. Manipulation hidden as vulnerability. Demands disguised as needs. Chaos masked as personality. You stop explaining yourself. You stop overgiving. You stop sacrificing your emotional oxygen for those who never learned how to breathe on their own. You begin to understand something crucial. Some people aren't looking for connection. They're looking for supply. And you're done being the supplier. Isn't it interesting how the moment you stop giving, certain people suddenly panic, as if their access to you was a privilege they never acknowledged, until it disappeared. 2. Silence becomes your new power. You speak less. You reveal less. You react less. This isn't coldness. It's self-mastery. The empath who stops caring no longer moves from emotional impulse. They move from awareness, discernment, intention. And people notice. Suddenly your silence becomes louder than your explanations ever were. Your boundaries speak in a language that needs no words. You're no longer trying to fix what was never yours to fix. And in that silence, you reclaim yourself. 3. You stop participating in one-sided relationships. You don't chase. You don't beg. You don't overextend to keep connections alive. You finally understand that love isn't proven through suffering. Attachment isn't the same as loyalty, and giving someone unlimited access to your heart doesn't make you noble. It makes you drained. So you choose reciprocity. You choose balance. You choose emotional equality. And that choice changes everything. Because an empath with boundaries becomes someone rare, someone powerful, someone who cannot be used. 4. You discover how much of your life was shaped by emotional conditioning, childhood expectations, cultural pressure, the belief that good people always give more than they take. These old beliefs fall apart. You begin to see how you were trained, psychologically, emotionally, to place your needs last. Your care was your currency. Your empathy was your identity. Your sacrifice was your value. But now you realize your energy was never meant to be a public resource. It was meant to be a choice. Yours, a conscious, intentional gift, not an obligation. Nietzsche once said, "No one can build you the bridge on which you must cross the river of life." Suddenly the meaning becomes clear. You've been crossing everyone else's bridges, and none of your own. 5. You become unpredictable to people who once controlled you. Emotional manipulators hate boundaries. They despise detachment. They cannot stand when the empath, their reliable source, evolves. Your refusal to care in the old way disrupts their entire system. Where they once triggered guilt, you now feel neutrality. Where they once controlled the narrative, you now see the motives. Where they once expected compliance, you offer distance. You become the one thing they never anticipated: self-contained, self-aware, self-directed. And in that transformation, the power dynamic flips. You no longer dance to someone else's emotional rhythm. You create your own. 6. You develop a strange, beautiful kind of emotional minimalism. Not everyone gets access. Not every problem needs your energy. Not every situation deserves your attention. You stop carrying emotional weight that isn't yours. You stop absorbing the temperature of every room you walk into. You stop letting other people's storms rewrite the weather inside you. Your heart becomes spacious. Your mind becomes still. And your soul, after years of noise, finally breathes. This isn't numbness. It's clarity. It's peace. It's the return to yourself. 7. You realize that stopping caring isn't the end. It's the beginning. Because what the world calls not caring, the empath calls something else entirely. Healing, alignment, reclaiming your emotional sovereignty. You never stopped being compassionate. You never stopped being intuitive. You never stopped being sensitive. You simply stopped abandoning yourself. And that is the real revolution. 8. Your presence changes, and people feel it instantly. There's something different about you now. A calm strength, a grounded aura, a quiet certainty that wasn't there before. People sense it before you speak, before you move, before you even make eye contact. Because energy doesn't lie, and yours has shifted. You're no longer anxiously attuned to everyone else's needs. You're attuned to your own. You've reclaimed your center. And strangely, the world begins treating you differently, with more respect, with more caution, with more awareness, not because you demanded it, but because you stopped tolerating anything less. This is the empath's second awakening, not feeling everything, but choosing what deserves to be felt. 9. You become emotionally independent in a way that few ever achieve. You begin trusting your intuition again, not the fear, not the trauma, not the guilt. Your true intuition. You make decisions without needing approval. You set boundaries without explaining them. You walk away without collapsing. This is emotional maturity. This is psychological sovereignty.
Marcus Aurelius once wrote,
"The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." And now, you finally protect that quality. You defend your inner world the same way you once protected everyone else's. You become your own safe place, your own emotional guardian, your own grounding force. Not hardened, just whole. 10. You realize that stopping caring was never about others. It was about you returning to yourself. This is the part that surprises you. You didn't lose your compassion. You didn't lose your softness. You didn't lose your heart. You gained something instead. Something deeper. Something stronger. Discernment. Balance. Self-respect. You finally understand that your empathy is a gift, but it's not free. It comes with conditions, standards, borders, because an empath without boundaries is a candle burning at both ends. But an empath with boundaries is a wildfire of truth and clarity. You start to shine differently, less like a lifeline, more like a lighthouse. You guide. You support. You inspire. But you do not rescue people who refuse to swim. Not anymore. And here is the truth, the one most people never say out loud. When an empath stops caring, they don't become less. They become real, grounded, conscious, awake. They stop performing emotional labor for people who refuse to grow. They stop confusing empathy with self-abandonment. They stop letting guilt override intuition. They rise, quietly, firmly, unmistakably, into a new version of themselves, one that no longer bleeds for everything that hurts, but protects everything that matters. And now, you're beginning to feel it, aren't you? That inner shift, that awakening, that subtle but undeniable pull back into your own life, your own values, your own soul. The empath who finally stops caring isn't closing their heart. They are stepping into their power. They are choosing themselves. They are becoming whole. 11. The empath finally returns to their true identity. Because beneath all the giving, beneath all the understanding, beneath the emotional labor you performed without recognition, there was always a deeper version of you, the version that wasn't shaped by guilt, or conditioned by fear, or molded by the expectations of others. And now, for the first time in a long time, you're meeting that version again, quietly, gently, honestly. You begin to rediscover what you want, what you dream about, what you feel when the world stops telling you who you must be. You realize you were never meant to be the emotional sponge for everyone who refused to clean up their own mess. You were meant to be aware, present, loving, without losing yourself. And that realization changes the entire trajectory of your life. 12. The world shifts when you do. People respond differently. Relationships recalibrate. Conversations feel cleaner. Energy flows with more clarity. Because when an empath stops caring the wrong way, they begin caring the right way. With intention, with wisdom, with boundaries. You no longer mirror other people's dysfunction. You no longer internalize what is not yours. You no longer abandon yourself to keep the peace. You finally understand what Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate." But now, you are conscious. You are awake. You see everything with new eyes, including yourself. 13. And so, the empath evolves. You grow into someone more balanced, more grounded, more whole. Not hardened, not cold, not detached in the way people assume. You are simply done absorbing emotional chaos, done carrying responsibility that was never yours, done playing the healer in a world that refuses to heal itself. You step into a new identity, the empath who chooses where their heart goes, where their energy flows, where their soul rests. This is not the end of your empathy. This is the beginning of your power. And the moment you realize that, everything changes. If this message reached you, if it found you at the exact moment you needed a soft reminder, if it made you pause, breathe, or suddenly recognize a part of yourself you've been ignoring, then you already know something is shifting inside you. Because transformation rarely arrives with noise. It arrives in whispers, in tiny realizations, in the quiet moments where you finally admit, "I can't keep living the way I used to." Maybe you've been letting go of people who drain you. Maybe you've been outgrowing the environments that once felt comfortable. Maybe you've been sensing a new version of yourself emerging. Subtle, powerful, undeniable. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." And those words hit differently when you're standing at the doorway of your own becoming. Think about the last few months. The nights when your mind wouldn't rest because your soul was trying to speak. The mornings when you woke up feeling both lost and strangely hopeful. The friendships that started feeling misaligned. The sudden bursts of clarity that came out of nowhere, as if life was rearranging itself to guide you forward. It's not random. It's no coincidence. It's you, changing, healing, rebuilding. So if you want more depth, more reflection, more psychological clarity as you walk through this private transformation of yours, then subscribe. Not just to follow a channel, but to follow the version of you that you've been quietly creating. Tap into the honesty. Tap into the awakening. Tap into the emotional rebirth waiting inside you. This isn't entertainment. This is alignment. This is growth. Subscribe and keep evolving into the person you were always meant to become.